What's up guys, Ryan from AntScapes. Today's video finally is my Trapjaw Mountain Island Paludarium. I know it's been a while for this update. The reason being, to be honest, is because the Trapjaws, there hasn't actually been that much development. The main thing inside has been, development on the plants, development within the water section, adding shoaling fish, things like that. But ultimately, the Trapjaws have been quite slow progressing. I have noticed though recently, more so recently, that they now have a lot more workers, they're more confident and gaining confidence coming out. I had a problem in that some of them were, well, I only actually found one in the water section, so I assume maybe it's more than one did, but one of them fell into the water section. So what I did is then I added more floating plants to it and just let them completely grow out, almost fill in the whole top section of it. And that's just because I didn't want any more casualties while the colony is progressing. When it's further down the line, I don't really have to worry about those sorts of things so much. But for this stage, it was getting the colony going, as when I got them, I only had 2 or 3 workers, I believe, from memory. But, I think now that I've got about 10 in total, so they are coming on, but just very slowly. So regardless, I thought I'd update it finally, because it's just been like 5 months or something now, way too long for an update. But as always from me, peace and love, I'm out. Okay, so this was it about a month after, something along those lines. The moss, plants, everything doing absolutely great. I honestly couldn't have been happier with this. You can see a little mushroom there on the right if you have a little look. But yeah, it's all going just really, really well. I am super glad though. This is actually that older footage that Rocky is still inside his, the first home I got him in. I hadn't even built it yet at this point. The Sabrina, trade century Sabrina, is doing really well. It started to trail over the branch. I didn't want it to be as thick as it was, so what I did do is I cut it down. I wanted both sides to be integrated in terms of, the Muhlenbeckia complexa, trade century from that side over to that side and crossed over essentially. They are always hungry for sugars. I've noticed that. They'll always take sugars. And for those of you people who, aren't wanting to see some live feeding, then, you don't worry about it on this part in particular. It's almost as if it's going to kill the waxworm I put in, but it doesn't. What it does do is it kills it, takes away later on. I try and do that as much as I can now. I know not everyone wants to see it, but with these being a hunting species, I do tend to feed them some live food. But alongside that, they take slug eggs, things like that from the surface. I've seen them physically picking up slug eggs, taking them down to the nest and eating them. You will see a little bit later on how the slug eggs look. They actually look like Orbeez, but yeah, they do also get all the slug eggs from the surface where I feed them normally. And this is where it almost looks as if like they're going to have an interaction with the waxworm in terms of just absolutely chop it up, but they don't. It just leaves it be. I think at the time it just wanted to move it away from the sugars. It's a little bit off-putting for it, and then later on it ended up dragging it to the nest once it had killed it. But that was about it really. As scary looking as they are, they're still very intuitive, and they do respond to vibrations a lot. So generally a lot of the time I don't get as much footage as I'd like of certain things, because while they're out and feeding, I don't want to bother them. I don't want to accidentally knock the tank, nothing like that, because I just want them to do well. So a lot of the time it's just me patiently waiting until this colony gets even bigger. I have seen a lot of brood lately, and they are starting to bring it to the surface for them to eat as well themselves, which is always a great thing to see. But here you can see it just sort of shoves it away from the sugars and sort of carries on what it was doing, and that was about it really. But I do leave the mist maker on actually a lot more than I thought I would. I thought it'd be more of like a gimmick, but I noticed how much the moss loves it. As you can see, you're getting water droplets like dew on the moss, and they absolutely thrived in it. They started to love it so much that I just decided to leave it on as much as I could. I did a switch up of the filter on there on the left. I used an external filter. I am still needing to change the piping around so you can't physically see it at the back. But for now, it's been absolutely fine for me. Now this filter does filter about, you know, the water. You're talking about 10-20 times. It churns it over within an hour. So it's more than enough for, you know, the actual size setup that it is. Obviously, it is quite a big setup, but I wanted to make sure that the filter was, you know, sort of exceeded what it needed to. I do feed them apples and potatoes, but that's mainly for the isopods. And you'll see later on how the isopods are actually doing really well as well. I do show a few images of those too. Now, in regards to the aquatic life, that's going brilliant. The shrimp are loving life, the sort of larger giant fan armored shrimp are loving it. Obviously, as you know, I only got a couple of guppies, and I also got the 10 cherry barbs, which are all still in there. And that's actually all I stocked in this. For about 6 months, I didn't do anything. And then all of a sudden, I was in a local fish store. I decided I would get a shoal of neon tetras, which you will see later on. I ended up getting a school of 25, which, you know, really do complement the setup well. They look great in the water section. I needed a little bit more aquatic life in there, and, you know, water parameters are perfect. As mentioned previously, the water cycle is, you know, 10-20 times the amount it needs to be, so the filtration actually over exceeds it. But the Trapjaws here, they're always on the move, generally always trying to have a little look around. The workers are on the surface, but generally only around this one area. I don't really see them climbing, you know, to other places, things like that. I think until the colony gets bigger, they're probably going to be quite reserved for now. But I'm hoping in the next 2 months, you know, I'll see a huge boom in population. As I've mentioned, there's a lot of eggs and brood now that I've physically seen that they bring to food. So this is one of the moments where there's a mealworm on the surface, you know, you won't see it physically kill it here. I do cut that out for the people who are bothered by it. You know, I understand not everyone is into live feeding, but essentially it kills it off and it drags it back to its nest, you know, for the rest of the colony. The part you guys actually only see is it dragging it back to the nest, and you will see that in a moment. And this is what I mean. It does end up just killing it, taking it back to the nest. You'll see a little montage of it dragging it around, trying to get it back to its home. But, you know, the Trapjaws themselves, they, you know, do get into sort of some absolute instinct when they see anything live. And, you know, to me, that's just a sign that they do need to have live food. As mentioned, you know, they are active hunters in nature. So I find, as well as obviously being opportunists and scavengers, but the main thing they do is hunt live. So I did skip some of the parts out where they are hunting things live because I know people don't like it. So the only part you really see here is when it's trying to get a good grip on it to take it back to the nest for the rest of the colony. As you'll probably know and can probably tell, there's a lot of maintenance that goes into, like, you know, cutting the plants down, things like that, making sure there's no plants encroaching over the sides of the glass where the trapjaws can get out. Obviously they can't climb glass, but you know, it's always safe to make sure the plants aren't protruding over the glass, so they can easily just get out if they want to, or decide to you know, sort of forage further afield. But at this point, you can see it's just going really well. I did move some you know, aquatic plants out of that water section. Them giant armoured fan shrimp are just absolutely awesome. I love them. They're a great little addition in there, you know, a nice conversation starter, and I just actually really like them. I had them in my mini aquarium for a while, and you know, these in particular have just been thriving in this setup since I moved them over. You can see here, sorry, that the floating plants in particular is starting to pad out, obviously with me worrying about the trapjaws potentially falling in. There's my school of neon tetraries, going really well. Some of the original cherry barbs you'll see as well. I still do have all 10. No, sorry, I think I have 9 now. One of them did die, unfortunately, but I waited about 6 months, like I say, before I added the neon tetraries in. Sometimes you can get a die off with fish, but you know, I was fortunate enough that I didn't. The roots are now just going crazy in the water section, so I'm constantly having to take out, you know, all of the roots now and then, or I'll just trim them down. Obviously, it's only really beneficial that the roots are inside the water, helping clear that water section up too, which is again another form of filtration that I have in there that makes me have to worry less about the water parameters. And we've got a cute little flower here growing out of the peperomia, which is always a good thing. But here's the slug eggs. So actually before this there was an absolute mound of them. You know, they were just crazy in terms of how many slug eggs there was, and they dragged so many back down to the nest. And here's one of the tropical orange isopods with all of the little babies underneath it. I don't know if you can see, but how adorable is that? She's just protecting them with her life, all underneath it, making sure that they're all super safe. Honestly, it really is fascinating. But you can see now the plants are very thick. They've started to pad out really well. I will obviously be trimming these down a little bit more regular now that, you know, the growth on them is even bigger than it was initially. The flower on that peperomia is even bigger now. But you know, everything in here it's just going really well. This area is actually where the tunnels are. I was trying to get an image of them, you know, through to where they tunnel down into, because they do bring brood up to the top, obviously, to eat and things, which unfortunately I didn't get an image of, but I'm sure, you know, I will be getting a lot more footage of that further down the line. The great thing about this at this stage is this is actually the tank when I first set it up. You know, it's crazy. You can see all the plants in the water section. It just looks, you know, I guess so bare compared to now, because if you actually look at it now, there we go, and that's even after a trim. So yeah, I do need to trim a little bit more, I know, but you know, the moss, the plants, everything in this setup couldn't be going better. But I do apologise for it being so long since I actually updated this setup or published it on the channel. I will be making sure that I make a conscious effort to make sure I put one every, you know, 2 months max, we'll say every 2 months max. I'll try and fit in a few videos in between here and there, but you know, until that colony is booming and you know, we're starting to see a lot more workers, there won't be as much to report. But regardless, I hope you guys liked the video, the update on them, and if you did, remember to smash that like button for me. It goes a million miles for the channel. Comment below, you know, what you want to see next, what update you want to see next, and hit that bell icon so you get all of my notifications. But as always from me, guys, peace and love. I'm out.